Good afternoon. My name's Ollie Moore and I'm a partner at ERM. I'm excited to be bringing you the 7th instalment of At Home with ERM and KGA webinar series. A lot of you have joined over the last few months and you'll know by now that the intent of this webinar series is to spark insight and thought and help your organisation to innovate and pivot during this period. We've lined up 5 new webinars running through to September, and today we bring you a webinar, Circular Economy at the Macro Level, how you and your organisation can pivot post-COVID. This is presented by our partner from our Brisbane office, Henrietta Jukes. Before I hand over to Henrietta, I'll hand over to our facilitator, Raquel Boyd, who will take us through how we use the GoToWebinar software. Over to you, Raquel.
Thanks very much, Ollie, and good afternoon, everyone. So in case you haven't worked with us on the GoToWebinar platform before, just a quick note on how we can interact with each other using this platform. So firstly, I will note that all participants are automatically muted. And also, please note that this webinar is being recorded. Now, there are 2 ways to interact throughout the session. There is the question mark icon that you'll see on your control panel. And at any time through the session, you can go into there and type in a question, which we will come to at the end of the session in our Q&A part of the session, or alternately, we'll be able to respond to your question during the presentation time or after. The other way to interact through the session is with the hands up. So when we do get to the Q&A session after our content presentation by Henrietta, you'll be able to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question verbally. I'll be able to unmute your line so that you can then speak to the entire webinar and ask Henrietta the question and engage in discussion that way. So I encourage you to bear those 2 ways in mind, and do note, please, that you can enter questions in that typed question mark icon at any time throughout the session. So we are in 2 parts today. We will have our contents firstly presented by Henrietta, and then we'll go to a Q&A session toward the end of our time together. So without further ado, Henrietta, over to you.
Thanks, Raquel. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today to talk about the circular economy. I'd like to set the scene on what I'm going to be covering over the next 25 to 30 minutes. For those of you not familiar with the principles of a circular economy, I'm going to give a brief overview and discussion on what it means. Then I will move on to why COVID-19 has become an enabler for these principles. I will then talk about practical applications for businesses to move towards a circular economy. And lastly, what we as individuals can do to contribute to this movement. We've never had a better chance to make a greener world. COVID-19 has delivered unusual environmental benefits, including cleaner air, lower carbon emissions, and a respite for wildlife. How can we capitalise on this now? The circular economy concept has deep-rooted origins and cannot be traced back to one single date or author. Its practical application to modern economic systems and industrial processes, however, has gained momentum since the late 1970s, led by a small number of academics, thought leaders, and businesses. The most referred definition was framed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, a recognised global leader in this field, as an industrial economy that is restorative or regenerative by intention and by design. The circular economy moves from a take, waste, dispose linear economy to the 3 core principles of a circular economy. Number 1 being to design out waste and pollution. Number 2, to keep products in use for as long as possible. And lastly, to regenerate natural systems. A circular economy replaces the end-of-life concept with restoration and regeneration. It shifts towards the use of renewable energy, eliminates the use of toxic chemicals which impair reuse, and aims for the elimination of waste through the superior design of materials, products, systems, and business models. It embeds stewardship principles where designers and manufacturers engineer products to eliminate or reduce end-of-life environmental impacts. In a circular economy, all materials should be used in such a way that they can be cycled indefinitely, just as theoretically they can in nature. KPMG estimates that a circular economy could give Australia a $23 million boost in present GDP value by 2025. Okay, so just to give you a break from my voice, I'm now going to play a really good video from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This is a very simple explanation of the principles and pillars of the circular economy and will play for 3 minutes. Okay, so before we move on to the next slide, I wanted to ask you 2 questions to get an idea of how familiar these concepts are to your business, and if you have any policies or procedures that may contribute to this movement. So I'm going to hand over to Raquel, who's going to do a poll.
Thanks, Henrietta. All right, everyone, what you should see coming up on your screens in a moment is a poll that's embedded within the GoToWebinar software that we're using. So the question as posed is this: have you ever heard the term circular economy being used in your business? So you have the opportunity to just vote yes or no on that question. So I'll just give it a moment. More than half of you have responded already, and I can see those results coming up. So let's give it another maybe 5 seconds for people to enter their response. And then I'll be able to show you all your results. So the question is, have you ever heard the term circular economy being used in your business? Okay, if you haven't responded yet, have a look on the screen, click on either the yes or the no. Great. Let me just close that now, and I will share the results. So we've got a pretty fair split there, Henrietta. We've got 2/3 of our attendees are indicating that yes, they have heard that term used in their businesses, and about 1/3 saying no.
Okay, fantastic. That's really great.
Shall we move to the next one?
Yeah, thank you, Raquel.
All right. So now I'm going to move to our second question. And that will be showing on your screens right about now. And the question is, are you aware if your business has any policies that relate to the circular economy, such as a sustainable procurement policy? Again, it's a binary answer, yes or no. So please just take a moment to think about that and indicate by clicking on your screen either yes or no. So the question again, are you aware if your business has any policies that relate to the circular economy, such as a sustainable procurement policy? All right, most of you have put your answers in already now. So I'll give it another few seconds just to catch the last. Great. All right, I'm going to close that now and share with you your results. So again, Henrietta, a nice even split here, but 40% saying yes, they do have policies related to circular economy, and 60% indicating no.
That's fantastic, and actually exactly where I thought it would probably be. Probably actually a few more businesses have got policies relating to the circular economy already, which is really, really great to see, and 60% obviously at the beginning of that journey. So let's see if we can help move that along with the next few slides. Thanks, Raquel. Okay, so before taking you through some of the global initiatives, I just wanted to share some facts with you to set the scene. So I've taken the following statistics from the United Nations Environment Programme website. Around 90 billion tonnes of natural resources are extracted every year to support the global economy. That is more than 12 tonnes for every person on the planet. Based on current trends, that number is expected to more than double by 2050. Currently, only 9% of resources find their way back into products after their first use. Plastics are accumulating in the world's oceans, and only 14% of plastic packaging is collected for recycling globally. Heavy metals from electronics waste are polluting the air and soil, with only 20% of electronics collected for recycling. And as we know, smog from fossil fuel combustion frequently blankets the world's most populous cities. The impact of these staggering figures is clear to see in widespread environmental destruction, pollution, and climate change. So which countries are leading the way with the circular economy? Denmark's resource strategy, passed in 2013, treats all waste as a resource that should either be recycled or reused. A law bans the construction of any new incineration plants, and they're looking to do more to promote the circular economy. Denmark want to put in place more advanced return systems for products such as garments, electronics, and rare earth minerals, which today's return systems can't handle, and to design products with disassembly as the end goal to ensure everything in a product can be recycled and reused in new production. The Netherlands also has stringent reuse legislation. They have a set of regulations and fiscal and financial measures that have resulted in a leading role regarding the collection of household waste, e-waste, and regulated car demolition. Extended producer responsibility and voluntary targets with sector organisations are at the heart of waste management. Scotland is ahead of the rest of the UK in legislating circular economy practices. In 2013, Scotland became the first nation to join the Ellen MacArthur Foundation CE100 Circular Economy Group. The network, consisting of 100 companies such as Cisco and Amazon, aimed for a 3-year transition to a circular economy. Scotland is on track to meet a waste reduction goal of 25% from 2011 levels by 2025. Sweden has passed a law that requires retailers selling electronic goods to accept the same quantity for reuse or recycling. The country has also passed a law requiring packaging manufacturers to recycle more of their material. And finally, Japan has also moved towards a highly efficient circular economy, thanks primarily to the pioneering law for the promotion of efficient utilisation of resources, passed in the year 2000. The law, which treats materials as circular goods, covers products' entire lifespans. Manufacturers are legally required to also run disassembly plants, with material recovery legally mandated as well. That turns the headache of product disposal into an asset as companies can reuse all materials. Today, a whopping 98% of metals are recovered in Japan. One global initiative is the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy, or PACE, launched in 2018 at the World Global Economic Forum. The leadership group is made up of company CEOs and of government department representatives. Disappointingly, there is no Australian government representative, but Rio Tinto CEO Jean-Sébastien Jacques is part of this forum, which is great. So what's happening with the circular economy in Australia? Australia's current economic system is predominantly linear. We take, make, use and dispose. The Australian government prepared a National Waste Policy Action Plan in 2019, which presents targets and actions to implement the 2018 National Waste Policy. This was the first coordinated approach for Australia, as the policy was developed by federal, state and territory and local government associations. There are 7 national targets as detailed in the slide. It's also worth noting here that up until early 2018, the majority of Australia's recyclable waste was exported to China. China's ban on foreign waste presented an opportunity for Australia to change the way it thinks about dealing with waste, but it has been slow off the mark. The Waste Management Association of Australia lobbied the Australian government, and I quote, to create that circular economy that's happening overseas in 2017 when the ban was first announced. But it wasn't until 2019 that some sort of coordinated approach was levied. The Product Stewardship Act first came out in 2011 but was reviewed last year in 2019, provides a flexible and practical approach to product stewardship by recognising that each product, material and industry is unique. It allows products to be regulated or product stewardship arrangements to be accredited by the Australian government. In May this year, Planet Ark were provided with $1.6 million funding from the federal government to develop a national circular economy hub and marketplace, which will be Australia's leading platform to help Australian businesses implement circular economy principles. So what is the waste situation in Australia? In 2018, the ABC produced a report on Australia's waste. The graphic on the left shows the percent of materials that are recycled in Australia, and the graphic on the right shows the percent of materials that end up in landfill. In Australia, it is mainly state governments working together with business to implement strategies to move towards a circular economy. In February 2019, the New South Wales government released its circular economy policy statement titled Too Good to Waste. The statement provides a framework for implementing initiatives throughout the product life cycle, from design, manufacturing and retail to end-of-life disposal. The policy forms a basis for a 20-year waste strategy for New South Wales, which will be implemented and underpinned by circular economy principles. Also in 2019, the Victorian government went out to consultation on its circular economy policy. The 2019-2020 Victorian budget set aside $35 million to to strengthen and diversify Victoria's waste and recycling industry. Victoria has been the state most affected by China's national sword policy, with many councils being left without a recycling service last year after the closure of the recycler SKM. Both initiatives are expected to gather industry, government and the community together to reach innovative solutions for the transition. It's also worth mentioning that South Australia's Next Waste Strategy 2020 to 2025, a vision for a circular economy, and their food waste strategy, Valuing Our Food Waste, was released yesterday for consultation and can be found on the Green Industry South Australia website if you are interested in reviewing and providing feedback. In a first for Australia, Queensland welcomed the Circular Economy Lab in 2019, an experimental and collaborative environment with a mission to accelerate the circular economy in Queensland. This lab was set up in February 2019 by Corio Business Models Inc. and supported by the Queensland Department of Environment and Science. In a programme facilitated by the lab, 26 industry organisations, including Suez, Fisher & Paykel and Lendlease, came together to co-author design solutions for circularity challenges faced by their industry. The programme used design thinking to develop and pitch 5 projects, with each pitching for their share of a $100,000 seed fund. Design thinking and circular economy principles were applied to create projects everywhere, from improved meat packaging to a digital tool to quantify the value of the circular economy. Most are now set to begin implementation this year. So how has COVID-19 become an enabler for the circular economy? In a matter of weeks, the world saw entire countries go into lockdown, resulting in border closures, medical equipment shortages, and unprecedented rates of unemployment, which are now forecast to worsen across the world. The current pandemic shows us that the existing economic system and labour market cannot withstand the shock of a crisis. Transitioning to a circular economy should be a considered approach to a more sustainable and resilient economy for the world. The pandemic has shown us just how quickly we can adapt when a crisis becomes no longer avoidable. This has been demonstrated through communities coming together to support those most at risk. Companies both large and small adapting their production lines to alleviate medical equipment shortages, and organisations distributing unwanted phones and laptops so that people can stay connected and children can learn from home. In moving away from raw material extraction and growth at any cost, the circular economy lightens the pressure on global supply chains and ideally builds the resilience and capacity of nations by anchoring more production processes in local markets. In transforming innovation and production processes, it calls for new skills and ways of working, as well as placing values on the existing jobs that fuel the economy. So I just want to share 4 infographics from Venngage that highlight the changes the pandemic has had on carbon emissions, waste, energy, and wildlife and habitat. The impact of COVID-19 on greenhouse gas emissions has been immediate. Closure of borders and population lockdowns have led to significant decreases in the use of surface transportation and consumption of goods and services. It has been estimated that daily global CO2 emissions decreased by 17% in early April compared to 2019 levels. At the peak of restrictions, it was estimated that emissions from individual countries decreased by as much as 26%. A recent article in the Nature and Climate Change journal suggests that ongoing disruption to travel and consumption patterns may result in a 7% reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions for 2020 compared to 2019. COVID-19 is likely to have a sustained impact in the reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions. The impact of COVID-19 on waste has also been immediate, with a surge in medical waste and disposable products such as coffee cups and plastic bags. The medical waste in China quadrupled to 200 tonnes per day, and in Italy there was an 11% increase in consumer spend on packaged food. In terms of energy, the May 2020 International Energy Association, of which Australia is a member, stated that global energy demand declined by 3.8% in the first quarter of 2020, with most of the impact felt in March as confinement measures were enforced in Europe, North America and elsewhere. Global coal demand was hit the hardest, falling by almost 8% compared with the first quarter of 2019. Three reasons converged to explain this drop. China, a coal-based economy, was the country the hardest hit by COVID-19 in the first quarter. Cheap gas and continued growth in renewables elsewhere challenged coal, and mild weather also capped coal use. Oil demand was also hit strongly, down nearly 5% in the first quarter, mostly by curtailment in mobility and aviation, which account for nearly 60% of global oil demand. By the end of March, global road transport activity was almost 50% below the 2019 average, and aviation 60% below. The impact of the pandemic on gas demand was more moderate at around 2%, as gas-based economies were not strongly affected in the first quarter of 2020. Renewables were the only source that posted a growth in demand, driven by larger installed capacity and priority dispatch. Electricity demand has been significantly reduced as a result of lockdown measures, with knock-on effects on the power mix. Electricity demand has been depressed by 20% or more during periods of full lockdown in several countries, as upticks for residential demand are far outweighed by reductions in commercial and industrial operations. For weeks, the shape of demand resembled that of a prolonged Sunday. Demand reductions have lifted the share of renewables in the electricity supply, as their output is largely unaffected by demand. Demand fell for all other sources of electricity, including coal, gas, and nuclear power. In terms of wildlife and habitat, there have been many stories in the press of wildlife returning to cities and water systems that have not been seen for years. As reported by Venngage, some of this was clearly fake news. But the quieter world and empty streets certainly has enabled some species to benefit. The World Health Organization has reported that birds were more likely to benefit than any other species, with reproduction rates set to increase due to the ability of birdsong to be heard by a greater number of potential mates. Okay, so I'm just going to do a final poll, 2 more questions, just to gauge if anyone on the call had disruptions to their supply chain during the COVID-19 restrictions. I'll hand over to you, Raquel, for the poll.
Thanks, Henrietta. So again, you should all see these coming up onto your screen in view now. So again, we have a yes/no question posed. And the question is this: is there a product that your organization was unable to source during the world shutdown due to COVID-19? So for example, new equipment or parts or anything of that like. So again, is there a product that your organization was unable to source during the world shutdown? So I'll give it another few moments. Most of you look like you've voted already. Ooh, Henrietta, it is coming in neck and neck. I'll give it another. I can see that. It's coming right in at just on the 50-50. Let's see how we land. I'll give it another few seconds before we close. But just thinking about that question, is there a product that your organization was unable to source during the time when the world was fully shut down due to COVID-19? Okay, I'm going to close that now and I'll share the results for you all to see. And there we are, right on 50-50.
I'm actually really surprised at that result. Thanks, Raquel. Yes. I would have thought it was a lot higher. So yeah, very, very interesting. Thanks, everyone.
A lot higher which way, Henrietta?
I'm higher with the yes. I know lots of businesses that really struggle to get certain products. And even just, from the point of view, the personal point of view, things like Dettol weren't available on the supermarkets. That's not affecting businesses, but from a personal point of view, there were so many things that were impacted, with the restrictions in place. The next question may be a bit different. Lots of people weren't able to get to workplaces, so this will probably be a more interesting result.
Okay, we can see that final poll coming up on your screens now. And the question posed again with a yes/no option is, was there a professional service that you depend on from overseas or interstate that you were unable to access during the shutdown time? Again, I can see a number of you jumping straight in there to click yes or no. It's going back and forth, coming in neck and neck, I have to say. It's we've had just about everyone put their vote in already. I'll give it another couple of seconds. All right, let me share the results with you. And there we are again, another 50-50 split, Henrietta.
Fascinating. That's really fascinating. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for voting there. Very, very interesting results. It's still a 50-50. Okay, so we're just moving now towards the final part of the presentation. So I just wanted to talk about how your business can move towards a more circular economic framework. So despite its appeal, the circular economy presents businesses with a big challenge. Rather than simply greening existing linear business models through traditional environmental sustainability practices, a circular mindset requires businesses to transition to innovative new business models that leverage disruptive technology and adopt shared value practices. These models integrate economic activity with social and environmental well-being to ultimately create a zero-waste society. Some examples of circular business models being adopted around the world include circular supplies, resource recovery, product life extension, sharing platforms, and products as a service. They all look to regenerate, share, optimize, loop, virtualize, and exchange. Political support for the circular economy is growing around the world, with Germany, Japan, China, and Greater Europe leading the charge. Closer to home, Green Industry South Australia has released a study which shows how the circular economy can create thousands of jobs and lessen carbon emissions in South Australia. Whilst it's very difficult to promote a one-size-fits-all to these principles, there are recurrent themes that can be used to get your teams talking and to start to promote the ideas of a circular economy. The principles on this slide will enable you to recalibrate your business to think carefully about your product, your supply chain, your designs, and ways you may be able to take this forward. The benefits of doing this include delivering innovative solutions for business, environment, and society, improving your company profile and future-proofing your business. The business model on this slide is called the Backcasting and Eco-Design Framework, and it includes 10 steps to guide your company towards implementing circular principles. So one of those first principles is creating a vision, a circular economy vision for your business. So how can you get started to create this vision for you and your business? So my suggestion here is that you firstly benchmark trends in your industry. You define what it means for your business to be circular. Ask how you can transform or create new value from your products and services. Ensure you have a sustainable procurement process that means you source locally, have less waste and less air freight wherever you can. Ask the business if you can sustain your supply chain if there is an emergency from your main supplier. Now, that could be from import-export changes, from exchange rates, from political unrest, pandemics like we're seeing now, or even cyclones. Understand what happens to your product or service at end of life. Ask the business how your services, products, and people can do more to negate impacts on the natural environment. And document all ideas, both big and small. So, I also highly recommend you look for support to validate your circular economy action plans. There is so much support out there for your business to adopt circular economy principles. If you are new to these concepts, then my suggestion would be you get in touch with your local council to see what support is available. You review guidelines and policy documents such as those on the slide. Developing a sustainable procurement policy is a great way to start, and ISO 20400 can guide you in this. The Australian Government Sustainable Procurement Policy is also a really great guiding document. Recent updates in ISO 14001 have a particular focus on consideration of the life cycle of an organisation's activities, products and services that it can control or influence. Whilst you may not be able to move wholly to a circular framework straight away, using your existing management systems to embed key principles into existing business processes is a great way to start. And lastly, how can you personally make a difference? These are my 8 principles for personally making a difference in moving towards a circular economy. So ensure you have the ability to adapt and learn as new processes, technologies, and innovations come onto the market. Embrace new technology such as 3D printing and additive manufacturing, which is the creation of lighter, stronger parts and systems. Break your dependency on global supply chains. Recognise key health, care workers and those workers that prop up our food and waste systems to enable them to have a greater value in society. Lobby government to support migrant workers to ensure they're not forced to choose between their livelihood or their health. If you're in the fortunate position to be able to work from home for some of your working week, then do so. Consider products where the design process has included features such as upgradability, repairability, and recyclability. And lastly, plant native flora in your garden to reduce water use and support local wildlife and habitats. So in conclusion, the circular economy holds particular promise for achieving multiple sustainable development goals, including number 6 on energy, number 8 on economic growth, 11 on sustainable cities, 12 on sustainable consumption and production, 13 on climate change, 14 on oceans, and 15 on life on land. COVID-19 and the massive disruption we're experiencing presents an unprecedented opportunity to reset focus and strategies. This can help Australia to leapfrog to be best in class. Circular economy investment into innovation, research and development, science, technology, decarbonisation and manufacturing can deliver a future-fit, resilient, sustainable economy from 2021 and beyond. So thank you very much everyone for listening. This slide just shows some of the resources I've used to pull this presentation together. And I'm now going to hand over to Raquel for the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Henrietta. That was excellent. So now is the opportunity for you to ask questions or make a statement, generate some discussion around our topic today of the circular economy. As you can see on the screen in front of you, just a reminder, now is the time where if you would like to verbally ask a question, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and then I'll be able to unmute your line so that you can then speak into the webinar. Alternately, you can type a question into the questions box. So while I wait for some people to raise their hands, I'll actually just go to the questions box. And Henrietta, we just have a clarifying question here, and it's in reference to a comment you made right at the beginning of your presentation. And you were referencing a figure from KPMG around the dollar amount that the economy could be boosted in Australia with a focus on circular economy. What was that number? Could you clarify that for us?
I actually did say that incorrectly, so I apologise. It's actually $23 billion boost. So KPMG estimates the circular economy could give Australia a $23 billion boost. I think I said million, so apologies for that.
I think you might have, but that's great. Great to clarify. Thank you. And indeed, obviously, it's certainly worthwhile when we're talking in those figures. So we do have a question here from Sarah. Sarah, I'm going to unmute your line. You're ready to go. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thanks, Raquel. And thanks very much, Henrietta, for a really fabulous presentation. I just had a question about leadership within an organisation and ownership of a circular economy strategy and where that should best fit. You mentioned, that it's best to have an integrated team leading the initiative, but then also you made reference to Rio Tinto's CEO being involved in PACE, and I thought that was an excellent example of leading from the top. So interested in your reflections on perhaps what you've observed and also, just your views on, who should own the circular economy strategy within an organisation.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. Look, leadership have to be involved. It always has to come from the top. They have to be involved. But I think, organisations need all departments to be involved in this area. So I think it's not enough to have a sustainability team or an HSE committee, driving these initiatives, because there's so many different parts to it that involve the entire business. And I think, leadership need to be involved in the process and the understanding, particularly as a lot of these initiatives involve prototypes and involve cost in trialing different ways of doing things. But I think it's really important to understand the audience that you're pitching to within the business when you have an idea, understand what leadership's goals and drivers are before you either go to them if they haven't been involved with coming up with an idea, or understanding what they might need to see from this and what benefits it's going to have to the organisation. You can't drive these principles without them though, because it's really a shift in thinking to have a closed loop system where any of the products or particularly in mining where there's many opportunities there to use waste products and probably to on-sell them to other businesses for reuse as well. You can't not have leadership involved. So whilst I talk about a team getting together, I think that team needs to involve all departments in a business, and I think leadership should be part of those committees from a very, very early stage and not brought in at the end. You know, certainly the background I've got. No, I was just going to say the background I've got is you know, a lot in policy development in the United Arab Emirates, where I work very closely with a couple of the regulators in putting together policies around, you know, biosolids and not calling it a waste product actually, but you know, also the Green Building Council. And every time we've worked with businesses in the Middle East, it's always been with leadership first, and then that's actually been driven down. But you know, it's a bit different in Australia, and you know, I recommend where you can get them involved as early as possible is absolutely key.
Great. Thank you, Henrietta. Now, Sarah, did you have a follow-up question?
I did have another question, but I don't want to hog the.
Oh, sure. No, you're clear to go ahead. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for that response, Henrietta. A different question really is so have you done any work looking at, you know, who really cares about the circular economy from an external stakeholder perspective? So and you know, we're very familiar with the concept of permission to operate, you know, that organisations have been talking about for quite some time, but the circular economy is, you know, perhaps requires a bit more explaining on the part of companies. So I'm wondering whether, you know, you've seen good examples of organisations engaging with their external stakeholders to really involve them in that discussion about the circular economy and what the organisation is attempting to do.
Yeah, look. I certainly have, but not in Australia. I've spent the last 10 years working in the Middle East and recently moved back here. But in the research I've done for this presentation, particularly in Australia, one really great example is Australia Post. So, you know, you're able to, they've done a white paper. They've talked about the things that enabled them, the stakeholders that they had to work with, what some of the debates still are around this topic. And how difficult it is to implement them. You know, whilst this presentation was talking about, you know, circular economy in a micro environment, it's really not possible to achieve circular economy principles unless you're involving lots and lots of different stakeholders. So everyone in your supply chain, you know, you're involving government to some extent with their policy drivers. And, you know, I think if you want to have a look at a really sort of good example, the Australia Post white paper is very, very good. Also, that circular economy lab I mentioned in Queensland, they have done a very, very good presentation, and you can find that on their website, which talks about the challenges that were faced with the 26 organisations that were working together to come up with five circular economy challenges. Basically, they talked about the enablers and the things that they found really difficult, and it's very good. And that covers, you know, 26 different industries as well. So very good to have a look at that and to see, you know, where they really found the challenges and what other areas they really need to invest in order to make this, you know, less of a complex challenge, because it is multi-layered and it's very difficult, you know, to do a general presentation like this when you're talking to multiple different industries where there's different challenges. But I think that circular lab paper and presentation that's on the website, and I can send you a link to that, is very, very good at talking about the different challenges that those businesses had. And also Australia Post is a very good example with multiple stakeholders involved.
Great, thank you very much, Henrietta. Really appreciate that, and certainly with that direct to some of those papers. So I think we've seen a few people already pop into the questions that they'd love to see some of those if they can get the links from you. So look, everyone, thank you so very much. Great. So that concludes our session today. Henrietta, if I can get you just to move to the next slide for us, I'll just show you the next few topics that are coming up in our series. You'll see that we have a session in 2 weeks' time on product stewardship. And then 2 weeks after that, we have one focused on crisis communications and looking at what we've learned about crisis comms from the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then finally, in August, we have a session on positive change management and what we've seen again emerging from the COVID experiences to inform us in elements of change management moving forward. So we certainly invite and welcome you to attend these sessions. The invitations are available on the KJA website, and of course your contact from ERM. You're welcome to contact us in reply to the invitation you had from today as well, if you'd like to get information further about our continuing webinar series. So thank you all so very much for your attendance and participation today. It's been a delight having you. We wish you a safe and happy afternoon. Goodbye.